Welcome to The Explainer. We're all about turning really complex sources into something clear, something you can actually use. And today, we are tackling the big one, Materia Medica, and how to build a winning blueprint for the AIAPGET.
You know, if you're a homeopathy student getting ready for that huge exam, this quote, wow, it probably hits a little too close to home, right? It's that one subject that just feels like this impossible mountain to climb.
So let's just start there. Let's validate that feeling. Because if you're feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of Materia Medica, you're not alone. Not at all. It's a totally valid and honestly a super common feeling.
I mean, think about it. We're talking about roughly 16 questions on your exam, all coming from this one subject. That is a huge chunk of your final score. And with that much information to cram in, it's no wonder it sometimes feels like your brain just shuts down, like it physically cannot absorb one more fact. But you know what the real source of that anxiety is? It's not even the super tough questions. It's that gut-wrenching fear of making a simple, silly mistake on a question you absolutely knew the answer to. Those are the mistakes that can just tank your rank.
Okay, so how do we actually conquer this mountain? Let's get into it. The answer, and this is really important, is not about putting in more hours or studying harder. It's about a fundamental shift in your entire strategy.
See, the old way of thinking is to try and boil the ocean, right? You ask yourself, how can I possibly read every single line of every book? But the smart approach, the explainer's approach, asks a totally different question. Where do the questions actually come from? We need to focus our energy right there.
And guess what? The answer to that question, it leads us straight to our first and biggest gold mine. The single most important source for Materia Medica questions is, without a doubt, Allen's keynotes. And understanding its structure, well, that's everything.
Just let that sink in for a second. We're talking 8 to 12 questions on your exam, a massive piece of your Materia Medica score coming directly from this one book. The marks are literally sitting right there, just waiting for you, if you know where to look.
And this is how we demystify the whole thing. It proves the exam isn't just random. It's not a lottery. The questions follow a very clear, predictable pattern. They're pulled from these specific high-yield areas inside Allen's keynotes.
Okay, just look at this. 4 to 5 questions every single year. They come from the relationships section alone. So if you just master that one section, complementary, inimical, the analogs, you could lock down almost a third of the marks from this entire book. That's a game changer.
And here's another huge pattern to watch for, the one-liner. I mean this literally. The examiners will just lift an entire sentence, word for word, straight out of Allen's and drop it into the exam as a question. These are free points, absolute gifts, but only if you've trained your eye to spot them when you're studying.
Okay, so Allen's is clearly the main event. It's our centerpiece. But it's not the only gold mine out there. We can pick up more easy, predictable marks if we know exactly where to look in a few other key texts.
And here's the secret sauce. We are not talking about reading these giant books from cover to cover. No way. We're talking about surgical strikes. So for Borix, you just drill down on those italicized lines. For Nash, you memorize the trios. And as you go through your reading, you keep a running list of every stalwart's observation you come across. See, these are targeted, high-yield actions.
All right, here's a real insider tip. This is the kind of detail that truly separates the top-ranking students from the rest of the pack. The examiners love to test your knowledge of the exact start and end points of the big repertory sections.
And this just perfectly illustrates that pattern. Take Kent's repertory, for example. The mind section kicks off with affection, and it ends with washing her hands. And it's not just Kent. In BBCR's mind section, it starts with blissful feeling and wraps up with whistling. These are specific, concrete facts you can memorize that show up on the exam surprisingly often.
Okay, so we've got all this great intel now. The big question is, how do we put it all together? How do we turn this knowledge into a practical, day-to-day study plan? One that actually reduces your anxiety instead of just adding to it.
First things first, we have to define our main enemy. And that enemy is what I call the rank killer. Now, this isn't some ridiculously hard question. No, it's an error on a basic question. Something about a common name, or a family, or a prover. Something you knew, but you messed up. These are the points that kill your rank, because you can bet every other student is getting them right.
So, this becomes your mission, your target. Forget about those 1 or 2 questions that are so obscure they're basically impossible anyway. Your entire focus should be on locking in this solid foundation of 10 to 12 correct answers. Get the core questions right first. Secure the basic.
So here it is, your 5-point action plan. This is your checklist. And notice, it's not about reading more. It's about focused, repeated exposure to the stuff that actually counts. Create those dedicated lists for families and stalwarts. Master the relationships section for those 4 to 5 guaranteed marks. Drill the italics and borikeys. And then, post your lists on the wall and review just 5 items every single day. Make eliminating those silly rank-killing mistakes your #1 priority.
You know, there's that old saying about productivity. First, you eat the frog. If it's the hardest thing you have to do all day, do it first. Well, Materia Medica is your frog, and by tackling it head-on with a smart, strategic plan, you conquer the single most intimidating part of your prep. And you know what? Everything else starts to feel a whole lot easier after that.
So, in the end, cracking the AIAPGET, it isn't really a secret, it's a choice. It's a choice between working harder and just spinning your wheels, or working smarter. The path is clear, the blueprint is right here in front of you, so the only question left is, what choice will you make?